Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. We help people get citizenships in a bunch of different parts of the world, largely through citizenship by investment programs. If you want help with any of those, you can feel free to reach out to us, but also through unofficial programs, citizenship by exception, and various naturalization programs. And today I'm going to talk about one such program that is pretty appreciated, overlooked. I don't hear people talking about it a lot, but actually is quite attractive as a pretty easy to get backup option, at least for a lot of people, and that is Mexico. Now, this is particularly interesting because we often help people get permanent residency in Mexico through like a really simplified procedure. It costs like 20 grand, takes 3 weeks. It's super simple and easy. And so that's one thing that we often do for people. I'll talk about that in a second. But that can lead to citizenship in what is actually pretty good. So today I'm going to discuss with you what you get with a Mexican citizenship. It's actually a pretty good passport. The process of getting it, what the requirements are in terms of physical stay, time, etc., and how you could potentially end up working your way towards a pretty attractive alternate passport that is, I would say, quite non-correlated, and so a nice diversification play away from a bunch of the traditional kind of Western passports. So let's dive in. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. Go click the little all notification bell so you make sure you don't miss out on any of our future videos. If you would like help with relocating abroad, figuring out where to go, setting up the best structure for doing international tax optimization, asset protection, doing international banking, etc., we can help you with figuring out what is the best solution for you, how to design the optimal structure, etc., as well as helping you with implementing that from getting residencies, citizenships, etc. So if you would like help with that, please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or send a message through our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so first of all, let's just talk about the Mexican passport as a travel document because it's pretty great. So usually there's a few areas that are kind of difficult to gain access to around the world. So these would be United States, Canada, interestingly Mexico, Japan, South Africa, China, Russia, Australia, New Zealand, maybe UK, Ireland, okay? So those are kind of the ones that pretty much everything else is pretty easy to get. Now there is some cases where people want Schengen access to the EU, and so sure, that would be if you're coming from someplace like India or Nigeria or something, that's a big deal to be able to include. But lots and lots of passports include that level of access. So these other ones are less common, okay? So for example, if you have a Montenegrin passport, you don't gain access to really any of those. And so that's barring Russia, etc. So this is a big thing. Now, the Mexican passport gives you most of those. Which ones does it not give you? Basically just 3. So it doesn't give you access to the US, it doesn't give you access to Australia, it doesn't give you access to China. However, of course, it gives you access to Mexico, you can live there. It gives you access to Canada, gives you access to UK, Ireland, gives you access to South Africa, to Japan, to New Zealand, to Russia. And so, pretty good access, as well as, of course, the rest of the Schengen and EU. So for most people, this meets their needs. Again, not kind of a replacement for if you want to gain access to the US, which is kind of one of those kind of edge cases, along with maybe, the other 3, obviously, Australia and China. But still, very good, right? And it turns out that we talk lots to people and we help people quite often with permanent residency because of this simple fact. When you get permanent residency in Mexico, it is actually permanent, okay? So in a lot of countries, what happens is you get temporary residency for maybe 5 years or something. After that, you can roll in and apply for permanent residency, but applying for permanent residency isn't actually permanent. You still have to renew it maybe every 5 years or something. Permanent residency in Mexico is permanent. It never expires. You can get it once, and you can just have it if you ever need it as kind of a backup play in the future. And on the other side of things, a lot of people really like Mexico. So that's very cool. You can be not tax resident in Mexico. You can have access. It's a good play, I think, for a lot of people who are looking for some added diversification. Very good way to go. And as I said, it can be done really easily, at least kind of the way that we do it, which is quite a bit faster than the normal way. Now, The really interesting thing, though, that we haven't talked about, and I don't hear anyone talking about really, is how this converts to citizenship. So you can get Mexican citizenship after 5 years of residence in Mexico under what's called an FM3 or an FM2 residency permit. Basically permanent residency. So temporary residency doesn't count towards your time. Permanent residency does, okay? And so if you can get 5 years of permanent residency, amazing. That's really excellent, right? You're off to the races. Now, the thing about it is, in most countries, the 5 years you actually need to be resident there, which might mean getting into their tax system, might mean putting in, half a year of time per year or something like that. In some cases, it's really extensive. For example, if you were to look at someplace like Cyprus, you need actually 5 years within 7 years, and you can't be out at all in the last 365 days. It's really tough to qualify, right? Mexico is pretty easy, comparatively speaking, because although you have to have had the residency permit for 5 years, when you go to apply for the citizenship, they only look at your last 2 years in terms of your actual time in the country. Now, during that 2 years, you cannot have been outside of the country for more than 180 days. So basically, you have to have been there 18 months out of 24 months, okay? So you have to be willing to put in that time. But really, that's not too bad for what is a pretty good passport, right? On top of that, they will ask you to provide evidence of all your entries and exits during that 24-month period, so you will need to verify it. You do need to be able to demonstrate knowledge of Spanish and of Mexican history, so it's certainly not something that you can just slip into without any knowledge of Spanish. But the good news is, for a lot of people, they tend to find that Spanish is one of the easiest international languages to learn, and you don't need super proficiency, you can just have basic proficiency. So you need to apply basically 180 days before. When you get approved, you're going to give up your permanent residence card. You're going to swap it in for your nationality card. It is true that generally once you become a citizen, they pay more attention to you from a tax standpoint. Their tax kind of policies on foreigners tends to be pretty lax. But as a citizen, we've got a bunch of clients who are native Mexicans, etc., and they do tend to pay more attention in that regard. So depending on what you're thinking, sometimes it's just a nice thing to kind of build up towards where you're like, okay, let me just get the permanent residency and start working towards my 5 years. So I have an option there if I want to claim it in the future. And in other cases, you might say, okay, well, I'm just going to keep this and maybe never claim it because it's just fantastic to have as a permanent residency. And then, of course, the final option is you might be in a situation where you say, hey, listen, this is actually a really good backup passport. I'm going to go through, put in the 18 months over 24 months in a country that's actually pretty good to be in, and say, okay, great, we've got it. We've got our backup, and now we can go and do whatever in the world. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. I think it's really a highly underrated option to kind of get into a second citizenship for really quite cheap, really quite reliably. And so, yeah, let me know what you think, and I will see you guys on the next video.